Everybody, welcome to the meeting of the Cabinet. So for the public record, we have Cabinet members present in the room, and they're going to introduce themselves, as well as a number of officers. Non-Cabinet members and senior officers will be joining the meeting virtually online, and I do have a note of attendees and speakers, but if virtual attendees wish to speak, they should indicate with the yellow hand icon, and this will be picked up in the meeting. And this meeting is being streamed live and recorded by the Council for subsequent broadcast via the Council's internet site. So if I could ask my Cabinet colleagues to introduce themselves and state their portfolio area for the benefit of viewers online. If I can start with Councillor Brabazon.
I'm Senior Brabazon, Cabinet Member for Early Years Children and Families.
Isidoros Diakidis, Cabinet Member for Finance and Transformation.
Councillor Daldagan, Cabinet Member for Stronger and Safer Communities.
Councillor Seema Chandwani, Cabinet Member for Customer Service, Welfare and Public Realm.
Julie Davis, Cabinet Member for Employment, Skills and Corporate Services.
Mike Hakata, Deputy Leader and Member for Environment, Transport and the Climate Emergency.
Councillor John Bevan, Cabinet Member for Housing, Planning and Licensed Services.
Councillor Ruth Gordon, Cabinet Member for House Building, Placemaking and Development.
Thank you all. Aisha, is there any apologies?
Chair, we have apologies from Councillor Desneves.
Thank you. Item 3, there are no items of urgent business. Can I move on to item 4? Do any Cabinet members have any declarations of interest? If I can go to Councillor Dowan.
Yep, thank you, Chair. This is in relation to item 9. So I would like to declare a personal interest. I started the school review as a chair of the committee at the time.
Thank you. Councillor Chandwani.
This is in relation to item 12 on the leaseholder building insurance contract. I'm a Haringey leaseholder, so I will be stepping out of the room when you discuss this.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Chandwani. Item 5, which is the notice of intention to conduct business in private. This agenda contains exempt items as set out at item 17. Exclusion of the press and public, and there were no representations received at the agenda publication stage in relation to the exempt items on the agenda. So if I can go to item 6, which is the minutes. Can the Cabinet please confirm and sign the minutes of the meeting held on the 18th of January 2022 as a correct record, please? That's a half-hearted agree. Can we say agreed? So item 7, deputations. I don't believe we've got any deputations to Aisha. Okay, thank you. Item 8, which is matters referred to Cabinet by the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. We have scrutiny recommendations on the budget, which we will consider as part of item 10. We also have a scrutiny review report on the Haringey family of schools, which Councillor Gunesh is presenting and is contained as part of item 9. So let's move on to item 9, and I'm now going to hand over to Councillor Gunesh to introduce.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. I just wanted to, before I present the scrutiny review on Haringey family of schools to Cabinet, I just like to place my thanks to the committee members and also the co-opted members who contributed to this report, and also our thanks to Councillor Dogan, who was my predecessor, basically initiating this report. We have completed this report following number of scrutiny review sessions, and to basically be able to put together this report and with the following recommendations. I will start by just saying that reading my reports, reading the recommendations of the report. There are now a variety of different types of schools, with a number of new ones being established in recent years. Schools are also now subject to varying degrees of local democratic control, and the ability of local authorities to influence them has diminished. These changes represent challenges for local authority, including ensuring that all schools are providing a good standard of education and effectively planning and coordinating the provision of school places. There are clear, significant and permanent changes that occur when schools become academized. These are not always explained properly to school governors, who might therefore be unaware of the long-term implications of their decisions. Schools that are part of multi-academy trust, MATs, do not always feel that they are part of a local community of schools or have any responsibility towards their local authority or area. In Haringey, there is a lack of involvement by some MATs with the council. HEP and other schools are having challenges in engaging with them. Schools that value the support of local authority are less likely to want to convert. The key means by which local authorities can help schools avoid feeling the need to convert to academize or become required to do so is by supporting them effectively to improve performance, partnership bodies, to improve performance. Partnership bodies such as HEP provide a soft power and an excellent way of encouraging school to remain part of the family of local schools. HEP has been a powerful initiative that has allowed schools to buy into school support services. It has also been successful in promoting collaboration between schools and dialogue. Although this does not necessarily guarantee influence, there is nevertheless a lack of involvement or influence between HEP and schools in some MATs, multi-academy trusts. The panel is aware of matters of concern relating to exclusion from schools run by MATs. A deep dive is currently being undertaken by the Council on School Exclusion, and this will involve at least one academy trust. It needs to be established whether there are disproportionate rates of exclusion in some schools or types of schools. Clarity also needs to be provided for school governing bodies on the role of the local authority in exclusion processes. It can be hard to change the perception of school that parents and carers have, which is often outdated. Positive engagement needs to take place to raise the profile of less popular schools. Work also should be undertaken to better understand how incorporate perception on the equality of education in individual schools can be better addressed. Demand for primary school places has reduced, and there is currently a significant surplus of reception places in Haringey. This has serious budgetary implications for many schools. Demands for school places fluctuates through, and there will also be need for there to be enough places available to satisfy any future increases in demand. The Council already had limited scope to coordinate a strategic response to reductions in school roles, and the changes to school that academize has led to have diminished this. It is only possible to directly influence a majority of schools. The only way the Council will be able to extend wider influences is through negotiation and voluntary engagement, but there are limits to this due to lack of close relationship with some of the MATs. At last, one school that is part of a MAT has attempted to expand even when there are surplus school places locally. It might therefore be the case that not all schools are receptive to engagement by Council. Schools might well find themselves competing for pupils, with less popular schools becoming unsustainable. This will make it difficult to maintain a balanced range of provision across the borough. This reduction in school roles particularly threatens the viability of church schools, as they are suffering from the largest drops in demand for places. It is essential that school governing bodies of church school understand fully what becoming an academy will entail and its long-term implications. The council should work with the CASM authorities to ensure that school governing bodies are given clear and important guidance or are signposting to sources of independent advice. Evidence was received that the relationship between the CASM authorities and the council is now less close than it was, and that regular meeting between the CASM and senior council officers are no longer taking place. Authorities are nevertheless interested in hearing the ideas of the local.
Sorry, Councillor Ganesh, I do apologise, but it's, you've got 3 minutes, but you've had about 7, which it's a very well-informed presentation. But can I ask you to wrap up in a bit, please?
Okay,
thank you.
Okay, I actually had 3 more recommendations to kind of read out, but that's fine. I'll leave it there. I just wanted to say that I recommend this report to the Cabinet. Thank you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to present, Councillor Ahmed, and I'll leave it there.
Thank you very much for a well presented and informed presentation, Councillor Ganesh, and obviously we've got the opportunity to go through it thoroughly, but I'm going to hand over to Cabinet colleagues to see if there's anyone who has any questions on the actual report. So, Councillor Bevan.
Yeah, in the report it says there was a learning event held with head teachers last autumn, and a further event is planned. Can somebody tell me what the lessons were obtained from that learning event, and perhaps when the next one is going to be organised, if it's not already planned? Thank you.
Leader, can I just check that Evelyn Reardon's online? Evelyn will be able to respond to the question. Thank you.
Yep, go ahead, Evelyn.
Thanks. Yes, as you said, there was a learning event in November, and in fact another learning event last night with governors, and we're planning a summer event which we're going to reframe really and come at it from an approach of less about exclusions and more about inclusion. But certainly some of the learning last night was looking at, and in November, was looking at the level of exclusions in the borough and the framework we built through the model for change to support our schools at a much earlier stage when need manifests itself in behaviours which are challenging on our school. That might include things like the Haringey Learning Partnerships outreach programme to particularly focus on primary schools, to go into schools and really help young people where they're struggling with the boundaries that are put in place within a school day, and as I say, where needs aren't met. I'm very, very happy to go into more detail on a one-to-one with Councillor Bevan if he'd like, because I appreciate time will be short at this Cabinet meeting and not wanting to take up too much time, but certainly happy to go through those 2 learning events, and as I say, the inclusion event that we're proposing for the summer term 2022.
Thanks, Evelyn. I suppose the point here is for questions to the chair on the report, and then Councillor Brabazon will be responding on behalf of the Cabinet, and obviously there'll be input there. Is there any questions on the report for Councillor Ganesh? Because as I said, Councillor Brabazon will be presenting on behalf of the Cabinet, and we'll have the opportunity to ask some questions on the response. Sorry, Councillor Gordon, you wanted to go?
No, my question was actually the Cabinet member.
No, it's okay. All right, so we'll hold off, and then Councillor Brabazon. Councillor Dawn, did you want to come? No. Okay, so thank you, Councillor Ganesh. We're now going to hear from Councillor Brabazon, who's going to introduce the response to the scrutiny recommendations, and then there'll be some opportunity to ask her questions, and officers can input as appropriate. So over to you, Councillor Brabazon.
Well, thank you, Chair. I think we find ourselves in the very fortunate situation of welcoming this report, the very important areas that are discussed in regard to school structures, and to say that we've, as you'll see from the appendix 2, we either agree or partially agree every single recommendation. There is nothing here that we would not accept, and I'm very grateful to Councillor Dogan and to his previous committee and the current committee chaired by Councillor Gunes for bringing this report. I'd just like to say a couple of things. The areas that are discussed in the report, including admissions, finance, school numbers, places, SEND and academisation, are massively, each in their own right, huge issues for our schools. You'll see in the report in paragraph 6.11 that the Department for Education recently carried out a consultation on what's called the School Improvement Monitoring and Brokering Grant. That has resulting in £250,000 being removed from our budgets, which were used to support school improvement, and that is coming in 2 tranches starting I think April and then in 2023. This is a big issue for school improvement, and we will have to manage and contain that in order that we continue to provide the support that our schools need. We have very big issues coming up with school planning places. You will know that numbers are down. We've discussed that here at this cabinet, and so a master planning process has been in place to look more widely at the school estate. SEND is an issue which we have also rehearsed, and of course academisation, which has been the preferred policy of the government since 2010, is something which we always have to consider. In addition, I just want to say I'm grateful to the committee for inviting people to speak and give evidence, including from the diocesan boards. We have a lot of church schools, both C of E and Catholic in the borough, and it is important that we maintain really good relations with the diocesan boards in how we look ahead around school numbers, planning places, and supporting the schools. So in summary, thank you very much for doing the work, for providing a report which is a good tour of all the issues, and to say that we are very pleased to accept the recommendations. I'd just like, Chair, if I might, to follow up on Evelyn's comments about the exclusions. I attended the event yesterday, the learning event with the governors. Massive progress, I would like to say in public to the Cabinet, has been made in support for some of our most vulnerable students. Exclusions are down, and the Haringey Learning Partnership is doing a terrific job working with schools both in primary and secondary to have an early intervention programme and prevent exclusions where we might, offering alternative placement for a while as kids go back into mainstream. And this is something which I'm sure we're going to be developing further over the next several months as we move forward in this academic, in the new, this year and then the new academic year. So thanks again to the old committee and the new committee. I'll leave it there.
Thank you. So Councillor Gordon.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Brabazon. I was just hoping, if you'll indulge me a little bit, to it's not particularly about some of the issues that were raised here, but I did wonder what action we'd been taking about absenteeism in schools in light of the pandemic. As I was listening to a report recently which talked about the danger of children who have been absent from school for whatever reason, and previous to that we probably would have had very rigorous systems in place to check persistent absenteeism and how we are picking up on those children that may be just staying away from school, maybe frightened to come back, for all of these sort of issues that we know have affected children's mental health during the pandemic. And I wonder if there's any sort of stream of work that the department are involved in that takes into that those lessons as we come out of the pandemic, how we are picking up on those children that could be sort of lost to school.
I'm going to give you a preface of a reply, and then I'm going to ask perhaps Evelyn or Anne to give you more detail. Obviously, attendance is recorded every week. I think there are submissions on school attendance. I know that during the pandemic, children's social care, together with the schools, during the height of it in the lockdown, were contacting families, many families daily, in order to assess how children were doing, particularly the most vulnerable and children we were most worried about in terms of social care. I know that Evelyn meets weekly, I'm not sure, perhaps twice weekly, with heads about all these issues, including attendance and so on. And I cannot give you all the detail you've just asked for, but I think Evelyn and Anne can. But broadly, I think we are monitoring this all the time to ensure there is attendance. And of course, the Education Welfare Service will be working closely with families to make sure children are in school. We do want children to be in school. I know that's a bit of a broad answer, but if Evelyn and if you'd like to give the detail, thank you.
Yeah, I'm very happy to just supplement a little bit of what Councillor Brabazon has said. So there was reference there to the Education Welfare Service. So we do have a service that we offer out to all our schools. There is a statutory element, so we will pursue families and cases where there's some intransigence in being able to get young people and children into school. And we offer a service that our schools buy into, but of course lots of work happens in schools before even the Education Welfare Service is brought in, to ensure that if attendance is low, if there's a pattern of missing certain days, if absences go above a certain level, that we will go around, we will talk to families and we will support them to get their children back into school. And we also have a children missing education service, and they are focused entirely on finding children who aren't on the roll of any school, so who are completely out of education, and ensuring they're put on the roll immediately and that they attend. So there's a whole body of work, again, quite a lot of work to go into just for this meeting, but very happy to take that outside if you want to see a bit more detail.
Thank you. Any more questions? Councillor Chamwani.
Councillor Brabazon, this might not be one to answer now, but just when I read the report on page 5 of 11, under point 8 of equality, I think it's the 5th paragraph, it did speak about the implications of poor education of Black and Black British Caribbean, and now a growing emergence of Turkish young people are excluded from mainstream education. I actually wrote my dissertation way back in 2001 on the underachievement of Black young men in Haringey, and I'm kind of I can see that the recommendation to do a deep dive on inclusions has been met and agreed. I'm just concerned that the underachievement can still occur even if the young person's not excluded. So I think there is a wider problem. I don't just want to retain young people in school and then they still don't achieve. I think that it needs to be, I think exclusions is one thing, but also while they're in school, what are we doing to make sure they achieve? Now, obviously it was a recommendation, that's what you're answering here, but it would just be nice to know that we're not just about arbitrary numbers of exclusions, but actually the thing that young people are going to come out with at the end of staying in mainstream school.
It's a really helpful comment. I see, Anne, you might want to respond about the work being done with the BEM Achievement Group. And just to say, a very interesting thing that emerged yesterday, I don't think it's a secret that most of the young people attending the Commerce House, Hungary Learning Partnership, have been African Caribbean. The level of achievement and attainment there has gone up significantly in the last year. Fantastic GCSE results, young people going to college. I think if you go there, it is a complete, I mean, I can't say what the previous Prue was like, but it's not Prue now, it is Commerce House, and the sense of learning and sense of purpose for those young people is just extraordinary, and I think that's indicative of a lot of the change that is being made across our borough with young people who have not always achieved. My own feeling is that we shouldn't just be celebrating the attainment of people who get A levels. We must celebrate everyone's attainment and push as hard as we can. The other thing I'd say is there is now an online Saturday Academy, which is got, it's called the NIA Academy. I hate the word academy really, but it's got, I think, over 100 registered pupils, and it is a supplementary school, and that involves year 7 and year 4. I know Anne, you want to carry on.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you, Councillor Chandwani. Absolutely, the focus absolutely is on on narrowing the gap and focusing on all of those whose attainment is below what we would like it to be. Not only do we want it to get it up there, but we want it to excel above there. So there's systems and strategies in place to as a framework, but it's more than that. It's the commitment of every teacher and all those who support teachers in Haringey to be relentlessly focused on those children and young people. Councillor Brabazon is, thank you for mentioning the NIA Academy. That's one of the initiatives to give additional support to those young people. Those young people who, it's a very new scheme. It's led by head teachers, but it's the young people's voices themselves. They very much appreciate it. We are looking at the curriculum to be sure that that's appropriate, culturally appropriate for young people. There's lots of work going on here. For the past 2 years, there hasn't been any examinations, and so it's hard to public examinations. There are assessments by teachers, and so as we go into that, as we come back into taking public exams, we'll be able to measure the improvement that we make. And sometimes we do speak of Black Caribbean boys, but it's not, our focus isn't solely on Black Caribbean boys. It's on all those who that need that extra support. The final point I want to make is that it's not just only about children in schools. It's about we have systems in place for those who are particularly vulnerable, to support their parents too, so that they can support their young ones. And again, happy to give more information outside if that would be helpful. Thank you.
I mean, can I check just on that last point you made, Anne? Are we collecting data on all groups? Because I think one of the issues that I've raised quite often is, for example, Turkish and Kurdish and people don't necessarily exist as a separate category and have often hidden, not just in schools data, under the white other category. And yet when you look at a vast number of our schools in Tottenham and Wood Green, this group makes up quite a big minority. So do we collect this data, and do we know that the situation in terms of being able to then provide a focus?
Thank you. I will come on to Evelyn for part of that. We have data, but Evelyn will be able to say how that's collected more systematically. It could be that within the rules of GDPR that's collected locally, but in terms, you're right, Lisa, about our systems are quite restricted for the differentiation. But if it's okay, I'd hand over to Evelyn for the detail. Thank you, Evelyn.
Thank you. Yes, we do collect data. We collect data at every level and for every group, and we're able to manipulate that data and break it down and really drill down into how different cohorts are performing in our schools. And that data is used by, for example, our school improvement partners when they go into schools to really challenge the school around outcomes for all groups, all young people. I should add that we do have something called a BAME pledge, which really every single school in the borough signs up to, and it is a real commitment that we will ensure that outcomes for all groups, all cohorts are as good as they can be, and that any gaps are eradicated.
Okay, is there any more questions? Is there anyone on the screen? No. Okay. No, okay, right, no questions online. So if we could move to the resolution, which is to approve the recommendations as set out at page 33, do we all agree? Agreed, thank you. And thank you again, Councillor Gunesh, for your report. So if we can move on to item 10, which is the 2022-23 budget and 2022 to 2027 medium-term financial strategy report. And can I ask Councillor Diakides to introduce the report, please?
Thanks, Chair. I'll make a small introduction, and of course we got here the director and the deputy director to answer any questions and other issues, because there's a lot involved, a lot of detailed information inside the report as well. I think one of the first things I want to start with is it's been quite a surprise actually, the process this year, including to myself actually, because the budget has been generally well received across the board, and throughout the last few months I've encountered genuinely collaborative and constructive reactions, with far less heated arguments and other disagreements than in past years as well. And that has been reflected as well in the outcome of the consultation, the public consultation we have to make, that it is included in the report, the results. Also in the scrutiny, its process itself has been far more constructive and friendly, I think, than previous years. And I want to thank all the members there, including the members of the opposition who have resisted quite often the temptation to just be kind of like negative about things. They have actually helped all of these people. The excellent finance team that we've had that work day and night across the council, and all the directors and cabinet members, of course, who reached the stage where I think we got a good budget in the end. We got a budget proposal. The first thing is that it is the first one budget in years that balances itself without any additional savings or cuts, as supposed to say, and allows for quite substantial actually levels of investment, both capital and revenue, in the development of vital services. Whilst at the same time, I have to stress, maintaining our prudent fiduciary approach we are proud of over the years, when other authorities are having serious problems with balancing their budgets. We've got adequate balances, reserves and contingencies, etc. And at the same time, we have contained the levels of the proposed council tax increases and the service charges within the level of inflation in general. Significantly, in my opinion, our budget also continues and accelerates the efforts, especially the last 3 years, to align all the aspects of all our operations to our future, to our manifesto pledges and our future political priorities. I won't go through, Leader, all the details of all the good things that are in the budget, but I think I'll just mention very, very quickly a few highlights. I think that a crucial bit is that we have a massive increase in investing in new council housing, very much needed as well, continuing the process that we started in this administration. A massive increase in investment in maintaining and improving and retrofitting and making more energy efficient our existing council housing stock over the years. We've got also in dealing with tackling homelessness, and particularly something that we are all proud of, street sleeping and other such aspects around housing. We have a significant increase, massive, I would say, increase of funding in our budgets that help the most vulnerable, and especially in social care, in the social care budgets and children's budgets, who have been in the past chronically underfunded across the country. And we've got a massive increase in funding our green agenda, various aspects of it, ranging from greening part of the borough, improving our parks, traffic reduction, active travel, stop plans, energy efficiency measures, all of those things as well you find in the budget. We've got an investment on preventing antisocial or dealing with antisocial behavior, community safety, and in particular, very significant amount in order to tackle, prevent, and deal with violence against women and young girls, and also on improving and significantly our genuinely public participation on the affairs that affect people's lives, and particularly co-design and co-production mechanisms in the future, and all other things. Almost all of those things that I listed could be described as investor saved and things, because all of them in the bottom line is that in the long run is going to reduce expenditure and going to improve the income levels and the better use of all our assets as a borough and as a council, and so on. We also, I'd like to put a few words on about the council tax and service and general charging policies of the borough. We have, first of all, we are proposing that we will keep the level of council tax for council services to the 1.9%, which is the government guideline, plus therefore the 1% extra social care increase, which brings the total at below the anticipated level of inflation. And effectively, the calculation is that for those on Band D, the increase itself for the council services would be around 83 pence a week. In other words, to put it in some perspective, less than the price of a pint a month, which is quite an achievement. However, we do recognize that even that small increase could be too much for those who live hand and mouth. So we are actually consolidating and increasing in this budget somewhat the council tax reduction scheme. The people are taking something like 16,000 of the lowest income and neediest households out of having to pay any council tax as well. And in addition to that, we, as a general policy, the numerous services for which we are charging as an authority, we are keeping the increases as a general rule within inflation levels, and so on. So I'd stop on these descriptions of the budget and say that one of the things I'm really proud as well in presenting that budget is that it is a political budget. It does reflect very much our political priorities, but above all, I think it demonstrates how wasteful and almost criminally wasteful has been this dogmatic austerity cuts and privatization policies that have been enforced on local authorities and ourselves over the recent years, and how there is an approach, an alternative approach, the one that we've adopted here, which is far more efficient and which not only keeps services, improves services, involves people in their design, but also saves money down the road. It's a far more effective way. And in concluding, I'd say I keep on thinking, if we achieve this budget, this modest improvements under the current circumstances, very challenging circumstances, imagine how much more we could have achieved with a different government and with different government policies. So I'll leave it at that. And as I said, Chair, the officers are here to answer any detailed questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Deakies. I'm now going to hand over to Councillor Connor, who's going to present the budget recommendations, the scrutiny budget recommendations, and then we can take questions. Thank you. Over to you, Councillor Connor.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to everyone for listening to our report tonight. I'm Councillor Connor and I chair this section of the budget scrutiny into the budget and the medium-term financial strategy that we've just been doing. This report covers the panel's recommendation, and then the panel's goes to overview and scrutiny committee, and then we make the final recommendations that are before you tonight. Just to say, I'd like to thank officers, both scrutiny officers and the finance officers, for their hard work. There's a lot of work that goes into this, and I'd just like to thank everyone at the outset for facilitating the process. It's always greatly appreciated. And also especially thanks to the co-optees on the panels who give up their time and energies to come along and wade through lots of papers and try and make sense of what we're trying to scrutinise. So a big thanks to them. So I know time's tight, so I'm going to move on quite quickly. And I'm going to start with the format of the papers. These were general comments on, well, general recommendations made at the start of your papers that you'll see before you. This really is about making sure that these reports are accessible to the public and to the co-optees as well as to members. We're not all well versed in legal and financial terms and terminology, so I think it's just a note that it would be really helpful in future years that these are looked into, and just make sure that it's as clear and accessible to everyone so that we can scrutinise it as transparently as possible. And one final part on the general recommendation was around that each panel to have its own specific area, specific papers, sorry, that it looks at and scrutinises, so that the Cabinet report is appendices at the end, but each panel does have its own revenue and budget information specifically drawn out. That would just provide a lot of clarity for members of the public and co-optees in particular, as to what's relevant for that panel that they need to be scrutinising, because I think otherwise it can be very confusing. So thank you. The main recommendations that I wanted to bring your attention to, there were a number that you'll see before you. The Housing and Regen panel obviously have a number of quite large recommendations that they've made. One that I was going to highlight was the site acquisition, Tottenham Wood Green, Wards Corner Market. They've asked that the Cabinet provides clarity around what provision there is for any potential future contribution to the scheme regarding investment in the long-term future of this site following the withdrawal of Granger. In particular, the panel notes the site will require significant investment, and that TfL have to date only committed to invest enough funding to make the site safe, and further investment will be required to make the market site viable. And the panel also recommends if funding is earmarked for the CPO were to remain in the capital budget, and if the council is minded to carry out the CPO without Granger, then this allocation should be used for maximum provision of council homes at council rents. So that's one of their main recommendations. There are a number of others, but I won't read them all out to you. You've got them in front of you. Just draw out a couple from tonight. The Environment and Community Safety Panel Committee had a really interesting discussion around the need to plant more trees, and particularly in the east of the borough, where they noted that the number of trees in certain areas were particularly low to begin with, and they were sort of particularly recommending that trees are planted as a matter of priority and in areas where there are particularly low numbers to begin. Also, they noted the lighting in parks and around safety issues. So again, sort of quite some wide-ranging recommendations across different briefs, but the importance of safety, and especially we've been particularly noted about women and girls and their safety, and just making people feel safe. I note that I get emails when lots of street lighting goes out, and in parks that's particularly important as well. In the Adults and Health panel, we noted one of the our main recommendations was the Cabinet give a commitment that the Adults Health budget is not reduced going into the 22-23 budget after previous savings have been taken into account, because there is some reduction, and as we have heard from Councillor Diakides earlier, there's great pressure on the children's and adults budgets because we know there's a much, higher need and increased call upon the budget in those areas. So that's one of ours. And the second one was on aids and adaptations. Again, there was concern from the panel members around delays for residents getting aid and adaptations into the home so they can stay in the home safely. And there was a real push to look for a wider range of services, particularly the occupational therapists, to come in and do assessments in order to sort of move that whole process on, and whether there could be some sort of really interesting thinking, innovative thinking, maybe partnering up with our healthcare members, maybe hospitals, to maybe share resources such as the OTs. In the Children's Scrutiny panel, they made some couple of very interesting recommendations, especially around the language used in describing reasons for overspend in the high needs block. They asked that in future documentation be modified in order to avoid the possibility of it being misinterpreted as apportioning blame on the SEND families. And I think it's just about the language, and again, it's about that communication with our residents and how they perceive what we're trying to say in the reports. So I think that was quite important. And then in your council, again, it's about residents and community engagement. The committee recommended the Cabinet should publish further details about this project, including specific details on how the funds are expected to be spent and how it would make a difference to participation with residents, including hard to reach groups. So again, that's really important. And then two other areas I just wanted to bring to your attention. The website, we all recognise as members as well as public, our website as the council isn't particularly great sometimes, and that there was a call to understand about when this website the new website would be started, and just more information on that. And then there's just further information requested on the Civic Centre works. So that's quite a whistle-stop tour. I'm afraid that's probably all I have time for, but I just hope that the Cabinet today will have read our recommendations in detail and approve our recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Connor, and the responses there are on pages 191. Now, can I turn to the Cabinet for any questions? I think they were both pretty thorough presentations. So can I turn to Councillor Dennison? I think he's on the screen.
Good evening. Hi, everybody. Just a few questions, if that's okay. The report identifies a structural budget gap. Now, this is £65 million over the term of the next council administration. Compared to the December report, this already assumes an extra £13 million of extra income. Therefore, it's logical to conclude that the majority of the £65 million will come from cuts to services budgets. Could you enlighten residents as to where the £65 million of budget cuts will come from?
So, Councillor Diakides?
Well, there's no cut. Can I just ask, because it's quite a technical, some of the answers quite technical to that particular thing. Can I ask the director if he can enlighten the councillor about this particular aspect? How exactly is going to be funded without cuts this particular part of the budget?
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Dennison. As the report makes clear, the council has a balanced budget for this next financial period in this report, and that will go forward on to council. And obviously, that's a prerequisite in order to be legally compliant. As it moves forward in the projections for year 2 and onwards, there clearly is a gap identified within the report. Actually, it's less for year 2 now than was thought to be the case when the draft budget was prepared, and that is going to make the closing of that gap, if it remains in that form, more accessible for the work that the council has to do over this year to address that. It's broadly about halved. And so what we'll be looking at are efficiency improvements and all of the opportunities that may be there for fulfilling the roles of the council, but at a lower total cost. And that's the ambition that we set out for over this forthcoming period, as described in the paper. Looking forward, as we've attempted to make clear, the gap has been projected to be as wide as ever. Ultimately, by the time you get to year 5, indeed, it's probably slightly worse than it was in the first draft budget that we put in February. And there's a number of reasons for that are described in the report. That's the long-term challenge that this council faces, and it hasn't really changed actually for a number of years. We've been carrying forward this sort of end game projection. What the report says, and it's consistent with what we said back in February, is that there are a number of factors that might change that longer term position. We know that the government is re-establishing the funding basis for local authorities under its banner of levelling up, and we are waiting to find out quite what that will do to our longer term funding position. We don't know as yet, so we're not able to project it, but by the time we get to year 3, which is the year in which the gap widens, we are hopeful that during the course of this next year we will learn more actually about how we stand and know then how to rebase the approach we're going to need to take for year 3. We're also planning, as the paper suggests, to use this period, this slightly longer period now, made possible because year 2 looks less problematic, to develop the change agenda of the authority and to develop the transformation agenda of the authority, which will, if the gap continues to be of the scale, Chair, that it's described at the moment, it will require the authority to do things differently. There's no doubt about that. But as I said, if levelling up helps on that agenda, then we'll be able to build that into future forecasts, and it goes the other way, and then we'll have to react to that. So it's a clear indication of the extent of challenge that we have in front of us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. So if I can move to the resolution, which is to approve the recommendations as set out at pages 81 to 82. Are we all agreed?
Sorry, Chair, I did have a couple more questions.
Oh, you didn't ask all of them? Sorry.
That was only one.
Oh, okay. How many more have you got? Apologies.
Two more.
Okay, sorry, usually you okay. All right, so do we get back on the okay, so scrap the approval and if you can just give your 2 questions and then we'll come back. Apologies.
I didn't know whether Councillor Connor wanted to come in because she had her hand raised. I don't know whether it's on that point specifically.
Sorry, Chair. Sorry to interrupt. Chair, I was just going to ask, I wasn't sure if the part of the OSC recommendations was finished on whether anyone wanted to ask me any questions on the report. Sorry, just for clarity.
Yeah, no, so apologies if I wasn't clear. The questions were for both and there were no questions. So that's why I moved on to Councillor Dennison.
Okay.
So there were no questions. Yeah. Okay. So Councillor Dennison, do you want to finish your 2 questions?
Sorry, Chair. Can I just then say apologies? I've got one sentence which I forgot to say on the OSC, and I'll be in trouble if I don't do, because this is one of their biggest recommendations at the beginning. They did say that the OSC noted that the borrowing cost of the general fund revenue budget was projected at 29.3 million in 2027. The committee requests the Cabinet comments on how the risk of additional borrowing costs would be managed if additional money is needed to cover increased future borrowing costs will this necessitate additional savings? And I promise you that's the end of my report. But thank you very much, and I'll let the questions continue. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm being a very generous chair tonight. Everyone's speaking longer than their allocated time, and so let that be noted, please. Councillor Dennison, if we can have your 2 questions, please.
Thank you, sir. There's been some changes between the December and February reports, and there's £3.7 million which has been reduced from the place budget. Now, this includes money for our parks, moving to a net zero council, making Haringey a cleaner and safer place to live. Considering the latter 2 are the most had the most first place votes when residents were asked for their top priority in the budget survey, why is this budget being targeted for cuts, and where will the £3.7 million come from, making Haringey less safe or less green? And my 3rd question is, as you can see from pages 106 to 109, the council's borrowing is due to increase significantly over the next few years. Are you concerned that this is storing up problems for future administrations? And does the ongoing fraud investigation by the Met Police affect your confidence for the capital programme success?
First, let me just take the general issue about the scrutiny recommendations Councillor O'Connor referred to, and say that you look at the list, it demonstrates what I said before about how constructive overall and sensible the recommendations have been. And I'd like to say later that and a number of the recommendations that are related to presentation and consultation and other things, etc., they're very, very sensible, and we're all, we're working on those. And on the rest of them, there are the responses, but also we will continue, keep on working and just finding ways of accommodating as much as possible, because as far as I can see, there's nothing there that we would disagree and we wouldn't share the concerns, and we want to do this. As regards the issues raised by Councillor Dennison, again, the first one is really almost like in the same sort of stable with the first question. I think overall there's a long-term financial strategy, a 5-year medium-term financial strategy, within which we take into account completely in all the estimates that you see, calculations, etc., the projected loan charges and revenue costs. They are taken into account on all those calculations. And as the director explained as well, every year we roll that five years forward. There's always a projected gap, if you like, after the 2nd year or the 3rd year. And we are producing these estimates within a lot of uncertainty. We don't know what will happen every year, but within that, it's informed guesses of what is the possible with the potential. And this, usually, in this authority, we're erring on the side of caution by and large. And quite often that helps us when the actual figures are happening, that we get a little bit better. We can't rely on that, but it is all, very, very similar, if you like, to the process we followed safely until now in that overall perspective. The director might want to add a few more details on the more specific points that you raised around, particularly the green budgets, that kind of thing. Again, there's no catch involved by any stretch of imagination. I don't know, we shouldn't be using that term, but again, I don't know whether the director can explain in more detail exactly how the finances is going, and it may be the deputy leader might want to add something on that one. It is his area in particular. Thank you. Yeah, John, if you wanted to add anything.
I'll be quick, Leader. So I think what's given rise to Councillor Dennison's question is that one of the budgetary changes between December and February has been that we expect the costs of concessionary fares to be less because of supplementary information, which looks then like, if you look at that area, it looks like the budget has gone down. It's because the actual forecast costs are less. There are no cuts of the sort that the member described being introduced to the budget. Rather, there are the growth areas that were described in those areas in December, and the further growth areas which are now made possible through the changes described again in this paper, primarily in the care services areas. Thank you.
Can I just add, because I think it might be perplexing to say, how come, you know, you don't cut this and that, and you make all this growth, you know, proposed growth. And I have to say that there is quite a lot of things. The director mentioned, for example, about the concessionary sort of travel savings because of the pandemic, etc. There are other things which, for example, work out. The council tax base has gone up. Our council tax collection is a bit better than we were afraid before, in the beginning, the original estimates, and so on. There are a number of those things. Our levy to the North London Waste Authority for next year would be lower, because actually the actual amounts we sent are lower than what we had prudently predicted as the maximum before. There are a number of those things that we have left no stone unturned, if you like. In addition to that, there's quite a lot of invest to save things. I won't go into a lot of examples, but there have been a number of things about the pooling of the business rates, for example, that will save us in the short term about a couple of £1 million probably, without affecting the services themselves. I think every penny, every new council housing we build saves us money in the end, because, you know, it reduces our costs on private sector temporary accommodation. You know, every penny we spend on retrofitting either council buildings or administrative buildings or council housing, it saves on energy and maintenance costs and so on, etc. All this, we've just done it very, very sort of like carefully. But throughout, most of the proposals that are to be put in the budget have gone through a sieve about investor saving possibilities, and that they can stack up.
So Doris, can I ask you to wind up, please?
Yes, thank you. That's all I wanted to say. Yeah, cheers.
Thank you very much. I know it's a very important topic and requires a lengthy response. Okay, so thank you, Councillor Dennison. So if we can move on to the resolution, I don't believe there's any more questions, which is to approve the recommendations as set out at pages 81 to 82. Is everyone in agreement? Agreed. Thank you very much. So if we move to item 11, which is the Council's corporate insurance arrangements, Councillor Diakides, I'm going to hand over to you to introduce the report.
I think it's probably straightforward, not controversial. Is there any specific questions that, you know, I think the officers are here able to answer the detailed questions, but it seems to be a reasonably good deal. There's something we've got to do as a routine part of our operations, this and the next report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Diakides. Is there any questions from the Cabinet? No, I don't believe I've got anyone online either, so the decision for this will be taken after the consideration of exempt item 18. So item 12, Councillor Chanwani, you're going to leave the room and we'll let you know when to come back. So that's the Civic to award a leasehold building insurance contract. Councillor Diakides, over to you again, please.
Ditto. It's more or less the same introduction that I made for the previous report. It's one of those routine things that we have to deal with. I think this has gone through the proper processes. It seems to be good value for money. No surprises, well within our estimated budget provisions. So I think I recommend we approve it.
Thank you. Any questions? No. Okay. No one online either. So this decision will also be taken as part of exempt item 19. So if we could move to item 13, and Councillor Chamwani is back in the room. And this is for the approval for Haringey to withdraw from the London Housing Consortium Joint Committee. I'm going to hand over to Councillor Bevan to introduce the report.
Yeah, so the London, well, it's actually called LHC now, is its legal title. It's been operating for quite a few years. It started off many years ago, basically around London. It now operates nationally, apart from Northern Ireland. And because of that, the legal structure needs to be updated to ensure that the extra supervision that is needed can be provided. So this report asks to terminate the existing legal structure and a new legal structure to be set in place to address the way the LHC operates now. Up until then, the existing joint committee will continue. So this report is asking the existing members of that committee to agree to withdraw and allow it to continue to operate until a set date when a new legal structure will be put in place.
Thank you, Councillor Bevan. Is there any questions? No, and I don't have any online either. So if I can move to the resolution, which is to approve the recommendations as set out at page 291. Does everyone agree? Okay, so item 14, which is the minutes of other bodies. Can the Cabinet please note those? If we can move to item 15, significant and delegated actions. Can Cabinet please note? There are no items of urgent business under item 16, so I'm going to move to item 17, which is the exclusion of the press and public. The Cabinet will now consider items 18 to 20, which contain exempt information in relation to items 6, 11 and 12. So I'd like to move that the press and public be excluded from the remainder of the meeting to consider this exempt information as defined under paragraphs 3 and 5, part 1, schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972, and I will memorise that one day. Can Cabinet members agree, please? Agree. Okay, so I'm now going to close the public section of the meeting.